There is so much that we could talk about when it comes to the Wolfram language. We, of course, barely scratched the surface here, but my purpose here is basically to give you a general overview and introduction to the Wolfram language kind of in the context of GIS and geospatial technology. And even in that area, we're still kind of barely scratching the surface here. So there's a whole lot more I could get into, but one of the things that I think is very interesting about the Wolfram language is how it allows you to manipulate data in real time if you're trying to build a model of something, for instance. Because sometimes it's not easy to go in and recode something. You'd much rather have sliders or some kind of user interface to manipulate data as you see fit. So I want to show you the Wolfram language technique that allows you to manipulate data in real time. And of course, we could go in and look at all different kinds of tables and plots and different data visualization techniques that are all very important and very useful. But since we've been talking about projections, let me just continue with that example, and let's take a look at how we can manipulate parameters of the projection in real time. So I've gone back here, and you should recognize exactly what's going on. I just took out the geopaths and the styling, so we're back to looking at a basic map here, created with a geographic of the world using an Albers projection, with centered on Washington, D.C., and with the following standard parallels. What if I were interested in creating something that would allow me to manipulate the centering of that projection sort of live and on the fly? Well, the Wolfram language has a command called manipulate, and I think this is really, really interesting. The manipulate command allows you to very easily create something about your data or your data model that is manipulated with some kind of user interface. So with manipulate, let me bring up its help. So over here, we can of course see there are lots of different ways that we can use it, but let's take a look at this first way right up here. Here's the manipulate function, and we've got brackets, and it asks for an expression and then some values here. And it says generates a version of expression with controls added to allow for interactive manipulation of the value of u between some u minimum and u max. So what that's saying is that, well, whatever it is that you want to be able to manipulate, if it's some kind of formula or equation or something that you're working with in a data model, then you enter that into expression. And you can leave one of the values in that expression as just a variable, in this case u, and then you'll be able to manipulate u live in real time. So the expression that I want to be able to manipulate is this call to my geographics. So I'm going to open up my bracket right there and put this whole geographics function as that expression. And then I'm going to hit comma, and I'm going to drop down to a new line, because now I need to declare the variable that I'm going to be manipulating. And in this case, well, what if we want to be able to sort of live in real time manipulate this projection so that it can center on any line of longitude? Sounds like a pretty neat thing to be able to do. So in this case, rather than specifying these particular coordinates, what I want, we'll just keep this line of latitude right here, but it's this line of longitude we want to manipulate, so I'm going to replace it with the variable u. Now down here on this next line, I'm going to say, what am I manipulating? Well, we want to manipulate that variable u. Oh, and by the way, I need to put this in braces. So I'm going to be manipulating the value of u. And in this case, there is definitely a minimum and maximum that seems to make sense for our longitude. And that would be, since we're talking about positives and negatives instead of east and west, the minimum value should be 180. That's a valid line of longitude, but you don't want to go below that, and then all the way up to 180. And that will give you the 360 degrees all the way around the Earth, and then I'm going to close those braces, and then notice that I'm back up to the manipulate command, and then I'm going to close that bracket. Now I'm going to execute that code. And check this out. Just as easy as that, it has generated an interactive map for me that I can use this slider to adjust the centering of the projection along a particular line of longitude. I'm not on a particularly fast internet connection right here, so you may not see it quite live, but as you can see, as I move it, I get a new centering of the projection. So I hope that you can see the power in this. With a very small amount of code up there, I have generated this interactive panel where I can manipulate my data. And of course we could get much more sophisticated than this with multiple variables and multiple ways to manipulate it. And so by doing just a little bit of coding, we can then set up an environment where we can experiment with the data and see what would happen if certain variables go to certain levels, or manipulate it in different ways in a graphical environment rather than having to return to a coding environment every time. While we're on the subject of doing this, I really want to show you something else that I think is a really, really neat component of the Wolfram language, and that is the ability to deploy immediately to the web, because it makes it so easy. So in this example here, let's say that we wanted other people to be able to use this little app here that allows you to change up this projection. We can send it out to the web live very, very easily. And we do this by just wrapping what we want to send out to the web in a cloud deployment function. And it looks like this. Cloud deploy, right there. And now I'm going to open brackets, and then I am also going to close brackets on that. And if I do that, if I execute that, it gives me a new cloud object. In the absence of telling it where to go and put it, the Wolfram development platform here will generate a new website and give me the URL to it so that I can go and access it live on the web. So I'm going to click on it to go there. It immediately opens up in my web browser. And check that out. We have actually just deployed a geospatial cloud-based app live with just that little bit of code. And so this will run live on the internet. When somebody comes to this website, and then they manipulate the slider up here, this is going to automatically make a call back to your Wolfram development environment, run that code that you ask, and return the calculation back to the website. There is one other thing that I need to show you with regard to this web app, because right now that's a private web app. Only you can get to it. You would have to be logged into your Wolfram development account when you click on that URL to be able to access that web app. That's a good way to kind of keep your data private, and you might design a nice sophisticated web interface for you to go and work with your own data that you don't want other people to see. But we can make it completely public. And I'm going to do that by adding another option to our cloud deployment, and that is permissions, and then using the arrow, and we are going to say public. And now we are creating a public web application when I execute this code. And if I were to visit this website, then I have this live web application that's available publicly on the internet to anyone who would like to use it. So how about that? Creating a fully public geospatial web application that anybody can access and does what you want it to do is as easy as that using the Wolfram language. I will see you in the next video when we start to wrap things up.